The scene was peaceful at first. The autumn sun with its golden rays shone down on the playground of Crestwood Elementary, creating a beautiful picture. The atmosphere felt like a still life. But beneath this calm exterior, something was wrong. Deputy Sarah Williams stood in the middle of the schoolyard, her eyes scanning every corner, her hand resting on the back of her canine partner Max, as if seeking reassurance in this strange moment. Max had been Sarah's loyal companion for over 7 years, and he was one of the most reliable protectors in the canine unit. Together, they were always ready to face any danger. But today, Sarah sensed something unusual in the air. An unnatural stillness was enveloping the place. Max, with his ears perked up, suddenly shifted his attention in a specific direction towards a man walking down the school corridor. Sarah followed Max's gaze, noticing that the man looked different from the usual parents picking up their children. He wore a neat gray suit, very clean and polished, but something about his movements, about his eyes, made Sarah uneasy. His steps were confident, too deliberate, but there was something stiff about him, something too calculated that caught Sarah's attention. Max had sensed it before Sarah. The dog tilted his head, his sharp eyes fixed on the man, and not long after a low growl rumbled from Max's throat. It was a sound unlike any other, a growl that wasn't just a warning or alertness, but one of anger, as if something was wrong. Sarah couldn't deny the growing unease within her. She turned to look at Max, asking in a low, tense voice, "What is it, Max?" Max didn't answer, but his gaze grew sharper. Sarah felt a sense of urgency in the air, a threat that was beginning to take shape. She turned her attention back to the man who had now entered an area near the principal's office. His actions were not like those of a normal parent picking up their child. He was too calm, too in control of everything. Sarah didn't like this at all. She took a deep breath and immediately gave a short command. "Max, follow me." Max moved forward without hesitation. Sarah quickly followed, maintaining a safe distance, but close enough to react if necessary. The man continued walking, not changing his behavior in the slightest. Yet Sarah could feel that something was terribly wrong. She thought to herself, "Please don't make me call for backup." She didn't want to cause a scene, didn't want to escalate things unnecessarily, but if the situation required it, she would do whatever it took to protect the children here. Seconds ticked by, and then the man stopped. He bent down, looking at a small girl standing near the playground. The girl was holding a pink bento box, her innocent face revealing a subtle hint of worry. Sarah immediately recognized her. It was Emma Parker, the 7-year-old girl who frequently played on the playground. Every lunch break, Emma would bring her homemade lunch and play with her friends. She was always the friendly, cheerful one, in class never causing any trouble. But today there was something different about Emma. The expression on her face was filled with concern, a flicker of fear crossing her eyes as she looked up at the stranger. Max noticed the change in Emma's behavior right away. The canine growled once again. This time it was a stronger, more distinct growl. Sarah quickly stepped forward, not wasting another second. "Emma!" Sarah called out, trying to catch the girl's attention. But the man didn't turn around, and in that instant, a horrifying event unfolded. The man suddenly reached out and grabbed Emma's arm, pulling her toward him. Emma screamed in terror. Her scream echoed through the still air, causing Sarah's heart to tighten. Max sprang toward the man in a powerful leap, but the kidnapper was too fast. He dragged Emma toward a silver car parked nearby, the engine already running. Sarah shouted, pulling out her gun and aiming it at the man, but she couldn't pull the trigger. If she did, Emma would be in danger. The man shoved Emma into the car, slammed the door shut, and in an instant the car sped off. Sarah stood frozen for a few seconds, her heart pounding. She turned to look at Max, the canine staring back at her with determination in his eyes. Max growled again as if urging her to take action. Sarah couldn't stand still anymore. She rushed to her patrol car, shouting into the radio. "Unit 11 requesting backup, child abduction in progress. Silver sedan heading west from Crestwood Elementary." Her body was tense, her hands gripping the steering wheel as her eyes remained locked on the road ahead. Max sat beside her, his head resting against the window. his dark eyes scanning for any trace of the car that had just disappeared. Both of them, when human, one dog, were chasing down the kidnapper and the innocent girl with only one mission: to protect Emma and ensure she didn't become the next victim of a terrible crime. Sarah stood frozen, her mind racing. She had just witnessed Emma, the little girl she had known for so long, being abducted right before her eyes by a strange man. Emma's screams still echoed in her head, but immediately a wave of urgency and anxiety surged within her. I can't let this happen, Sarah thought, her hand gripping the gun tightly. She felt the tension engulf her body, her breath becoming heavier as the silver car carrying Emma sped away. Max, her loyal companion, was no longer just a regular dog. His entire body was tense, his sharp eyes locked on the car. As it sped off at an alarming speed, Max growled low, a growl full of anger unlike any other she'd heard before. It wasn't the usual cautious growl, but the growl of a fighter. Max had recognized the danger, and he was ready to fight, not just because it was his duty, but because of the deep affection he held for Emma. Sarah couldn't stand still. She quickly sprinted out of the schoolyard, running to her patrol car. Each step felt like it was driving her deeper into the ground, not out of fatigue, but from the urgency in her heart. She had to act, not just because it was her duty, but because of a silent vow she had made deep inside. She would never allow another child to be harmed, like her little brother Ryan had been. Unit 11, immediate assistance needed. A kidnapping has occurred at Crestwood School. The abductor is driving a silver car heading west. We need to find it immediately, Sarah shouted into the radio, while quickly approaching her patrol car. She rushed inside, started the engine, and immediately floored the gas pedal. In an instant, the car was out of the school parking lot, speeding toward the road ahead. Yet Sarah's heart felt heavy, thoughts swirling in her mind. Would she be able to rescue Emma in time? Max, sitting in the passenger seat, continued growling, his head aimed toward the window, his dark eyes fixated on the road ahead, seemingly tracking every movement of the silver car. The tension increased with each passing second. Sarah felt as if time was moving too slowly. Every moment could be precious, time lost to save Emma. As Sarah's car barreled down the main road, she caught sight of a small piece of paper fluttering across the pavement. Without thinking, she focused on it and instantly recognized it, a small origami crane. Sarah knew immediately it was the same crane Emma had made earlier. The tiny crane floated in the wind like a sign of hope. But that hope was quickly being threatened as Sarah kept her eyes fixed ahead, watching the silver car speeding away with increasing urgency. The tension inside Sarah only grew. She knew time was slipping away, and if she didn't find the kidnapper soon, Emma might not be safe anymore. Her mind filled with terrifying images of what could be happening to Emma, and each time she pressed the gas pedal, she could feel the looming threat more clearly. Emma's innocent, frightened eyes wouldn't leave her thoughts. She couldn't let this go any further. Max remained silent but observant. His movements were steady, never faltering, even though the car was gaining speed. In that moment, Sarah and Max both understood this was no ordinary chase. This was a fight for survival, a fight where failure meant the loss of an innocent child. Less than a few minutes later, Sarah lost sight of the silver car. She kept following the road, but it had disappeared. Her heart was racing now, as if something was choking her from the inside. However, she didn't stop, showing no sign of giving up. She had made a decision: she would find Emma no matter what. Suddenly, Max stopped. He turned back to look at Sarah with unwavering determination. He growled once more, then leaped out of the car. Sarah barely had time to react before Max led her into an abandoned industrial district. The eerie silence of the old warehouses filled the air, but Max kept moving, his nose twitching, as he detected the scent of the silver car. Sarah followed closely behind, moving quickly but still cautious. She suspected the kidnapper might be hiding somewhere in the area, and her anxiety only intensified as each second passed. Then a faint creaking sound echoed from further down. Max halted abruptly, his ears standing tall. Sarah could feel the rising tension in the air. Max darted toward a small room with a freshly cut lock as though he had found where the kidnapper was hiding. Emma, the smell of the silver car was still in the air, and Sarah's anxiety grew. Emma will find you, Sarah whispered. Her eyes filling with tears, the love and dedication she had for Emma, along with Max's unwavering determination, created an unstoppable force. She couldn't and wouldn't let Emma be lost again. Sarah Williams could still vividly remember that moment, the day the fire truck had pulled up in front of her house. She remembered every word the officer had said, every comforting phrase. We will do everything we can to find Jason. But those were just empty promises. Less than 3 weeks later, her brother Jason was reduced to nothing more than a dirty pair of shoes discarded by the riverbank. All that was left was the memory of a child who had been taken too soon. The crying, the apologies, the reassurances from her parents could not erase the pain Sarah felt. From that day forward, a vow was made in her heart. She would never allow another child to suffer the same loss. The loss of Jason was not just physical pain. It was a wound so deep within Sarah that no one could heal it. It hardened her, made her more determined than ever. She remembered mornings sitting in her room, staring out the window, wondering why the world could be so cruel. An innocent child just beginning life was taken unjustly. She couldn't understand it. She couldn't accept it. And from that moment on, a fierce resolve was born inside Sarah. If she couldn't save Jason, she would protect other children, the ones she saw every day. She would do whatever it took to prevent them from feeling that same pain. Why did Sarah choose to become a police officer? It wasn't a simple choice. It was a decision that weighed heavily on her heart. When she entered the police academy, Sarah wasn't just hoping to catch the person who kidnapped Jason. She was aiming to build a future where she could protect children from ending up in the same fate as her brother. Joining the K-9 unit and working with Max, her intelligent and loyal police dog, only deepened her sense of responsibility. Max wasn't just a work partner, but an essential part of Sarah's emotional healing journey. Max was the only one who could understand Sarah's emotions, the one constant protector when she couldn't vocalize the worst parts of her life. Today, when Sarah saw the kidnapper taking Emma, the memories of Jason flooded back. The sensation hit her like a powerful wave. Her heart surged with a feeling she couldn't suppress. Anger, rage, and pain. She could see the fear, the hopelessness in Emma's eyes, the same emotions Sarah had experienced when she saw her brother disappear. She had sworn she would never let that happen again, and now, standing before this situation, she couldn't back down. As the kidnapper's car sped away, time seemed to stop for Sarah. She couldn't hesitate. Every memory of Jason, of what had been lost, was like a fire burning inside her. She had to act, not just for justice, but for Emma's safety and for the vow she had made to herself. This time I can't fail, she thought, her heart pounding and her breast quickening. She couldn't give up. She couldn't let Emma become another part of the painful past Sarah had lived through. Max sensed the tension in the air, and as Sarah stepped on the gas, the K-9 growled loudly, his voice full of determination. Max understood this was no ordinary chase. This was a battle for survival, a battle where failure meant Emma would have no chance. Anxiety and fear overwhelmed Sarah as the silver car disappeared from sight. Every second that passed felt like an eternity, and the fear of not rescuing Emma grew inside her. Throughout the pursuit, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what had happened to Jason, the feeling of loss, the pain of not being able to save a loved one. All of it was surfacing again. But Sarah refused to let herself succumb to it. She had already overcome that pain to become a police officer, and now she had to overcome it again to save another child. She couldn't back down. She had to do what was right. Max led the way, his eyes always focused on every movement on the road ahead. Sarah felt a deep connection with Max, not just in their work, but in their emotions. They understood each other without words. The loyal dog would never leave her side, even when everything around them was filled with danger. The sense of protection and unwavering resolve from Max helped Sarah push past the fear inside her. Every moment in the chase felt like it was stretching on forever. Every second could be precious time lost to save Emma. Sarah didn't dare overlook any sign, couldn't afford to hesitate, because if she failed, it wouldn't just be the loss of an innocent child, it would be a personal failure. Emma, you won't be left behind again, Sarah thought to herself, her resolve growing stronger. She wouldn't let the pain of the past crush her again. The feeling of loss of Jason's death was no longer just a wound. It had become the driving force pushing Sarah forward. In her heart, there was only one goal now: to protect Emma, to prevent her from becoming the next victim in an endless cycle of crime. Sarah couldn't fail. She would do everything she could to save Emma, just as she couldn't save Jason before Emma Parker was a 7-year-old girl with large round eyes and soft brown hair, always wearing an innocent smile. She was a picture of joy throughout her school days at Crestwood Elementary. During every recess, Emma would run around the playground holding her little bento box, diligently making origami cranes from scraps of paper gifts she lovingly created for her friends. Not only was she sweet and approachable, but she was also incredibly smart, with a deep understanding of the world around her. She especially loved learning about the stars, and each day after lunch, she would wait for Sarah Williams and her dog Max to pass by so she could offer Max a piece of her sandwich. Emma always gave Max warm smiles, and every time Sarah saw Emma, her heart would feel lighter. However, what no one knew, not even Sarah, was that Emma's life was not always filled with carefree joy. Behind her innocent smile was a life full of sorrow and anxiety that she couldn't speak of, a life of growing up in a broken family. Her mother, Grace Thompson, was battling stage 4 cancer, a fight Emma couldn't fully comprehend, but could feel clearly in every conversation her mother had with the doctors, in the worry she saw in her mother's eyes every time she prepared her medicine. Emma didn't want to make her mother worry more, so she always kept a bright smile on her face when she was with her, even though her heart was filled with fear. Emma's father, Eric Thompson, had died 3 years ago in a fire rescue. He was a hero, a courageous firefighter who never came home after responding to a rescue mission. Her mother never spoke much about him, but Emma remembered the times her father would lift her up and teach her how to make origami cranes during the evenings after he came home from his grueling shifts. She recalled every detail about her beloved father, and whenever her mother spoke of him, a deep sadness would wash over Emma. She always wondered if things would have been different if her father were still alive. No one knew that Emma had always felt like she didn't fully belong in her mother's family. Even though her mother loved her with all her heart, Emma couldn't forget that Grace wasn't her biological mother. Emma wasn't legally adopted by Grace. She was just the child of a previous wife, a woman whom Grace never officially adopted. Even though their bond was as strong as that of any mother and child, Emma always sensed that deep down, and despite Grace's immense love, she felt like an outsider. So when the strange man entered the school and introduced himself as Uncle Mike, a vague sense of suspicion began to grow in Emma. Her mother had once mentioned that Emma didn't have an uncle named Mike, but this man was extremely confident, and he seemed to know a lot about her family. In that moment, Emma felt a surge of unease. She remembered her mother's warnings to be cautious around strangers. But when Mike said he was a family member and that her mother had agreed for him to pick her up, Emma felt confused. She didn't want to question him. She thought perhaps her mother had simply forgotten to mention it. However, as Mike pulled her toward the school gate, Emma's heart filled with intense fear. An instinctual sense of caution made her unable to trust this man anymore. The moment Emma looked into his cold eyes, she felt a fear she couldn't put into words. His eyes weren't those of a family member. It felt as though he was hiding something. Her heart raced, and though she couldn't explain it, Emma knew something was terribly wrong. When Mike grabbed her hand and began to pull her along, Emma was too scared to scream. She tried, but her cry was choked, only a soft, desperate whimper escaping her lips. Emma struggled to pull her arm away from the man, but he was too strong. She wanted to run to Sarah to call out to Max, but the cold, strong hand of Mike held her firmly. Everything around Emma seemed to fall apart, and she didn't know what to do. At that moment, a loud growl echoed. Max launched himself toward the man, his fangs ready to strike. Sarah rushed in from somewhere, disregarding the danger, her only goal in mind to save Emma. But Mike didn't hesitate. He dragged Emma toward a waiting car, and before Sarah could catch up, the door slammed shut. The silver car sped off like a gust of wind. In that brief moment, Emma realized that everything she knew about her life could change forever. She couldn't understand why she had been caught up in this fight, but one thing she was certain of, she couldn't let herself fall into the hands of these evil people. Emma knew she had to be strong. And despite her fear and confusion, she understood that at this moment, the only thing that mattered was not letting anyone steal her life, just like they had stolen her father's. Sarah could hardly breathe. It felt like her heart was being squeezed as if it were trapped in a giant vice. The silver car carrying Emma had vanished into the night, like a ruthless wind sweeping away everything she loved. She had lost sight of it, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't stop knowing that an innocent child was being kidnapped, possibly enduring unimaginable fear. She had sworn that she would never let this happen to anyone else, not another child, and especially not Emma. Max, go! Sarah shouted, her eyes glued to the road ahead. Max didn't need any more instructions. Her canine partner was an irreplaceable companion in every mission, but right now Max was a crucial part of the plan to rescue Emma. Sarah could feel the tension in the air, Max sensing something she couldn't explain. This wasn't just another chase. It was a battle to save a child from the hands of evil, and Max would never back down. The heat of urgency enveloped Sarah as she slammed the gas pedal, speeding forward. She knew time was running out. Every second that passed was a precious moment, lost, each one possibly the moment Emma faced the cruelty of her abductor. Sarah's eyes relentlessly scanned the road, searching for any sign of the silver car. But there was nothing. No trace, no clue. Everything in the dark night seemed to dissolve. But then Max suddenly stopped, causing Sarah to slam on the brakes. She couldn't ignore the change in the air. Max stood still, his ears perked, his nose sniffing the air, clearly picking up something. Sarah turned to look at Max, her gaze fixed on his every move, feeling the rising tension in her chest. She didn't need to say anything more. Max had found a trail. As Sarah saw Max dart toward an abandoned industrial area, a cold sensation surged in her chest. The canine had led her into dangerous places before, places full of threats. This wasn't the kind of area she wanted to enter. But now there was no choice. Sarah glanced at the tall walls and broken windows in the darkness. No light to illuminate the way. Everything was silent, but in that silence lay a deadly danger. "This time I can't fail," Sarah whispered, reassuring herself. She stepped out of the car, and Max quickly followed. They moved into the industrial area, Max leading the way, his nose twitching as if it were detecting something very specific. Sarah scanned her surroundings, every step she took leading her into greater danger. But the only thing she could do was keep moving, keep following Max's lead. Every dark corner, every flickering shadow made Sarah feel more and more afraid. She could hear her footsteps echoing in the silence. Max's breathing and her heart pounding so loud it was almost uncontrollable. Suddenly, Max stopped again, his head raised, eyes fixed on a metal door that had been cut open. This was the sign Sarah had been waiting for, and it made her heart tighten with worry. Max didn't hesitate. He immediately charged inside. Sarah didn't think twice, quickly following him. When she entered, the cold air in the room hit her, and the sight before her made her pause for a moment. On the wall were scattered photos of missing children. Some of the photos had been crossed out, but Emma's photo remained intact, untouched. The blood in Sarah's veins seemed to freeze. This was the sign she never wanted to find. "No, it can't be," Sarah whispered, her hands trembling as she looked at the photos. Emma wasn't the only child to be kidnapped. She was just one victim of a vast criminal network. Sarah looked around, noticing a stack of files on a desk, and as she opened one, an unfamiliar name appeared. Luna Jennings. She didn't recognize the name. But as she looked further, she saw that the information inside related to an organized child trafficking ring. Sarah had no more doubts. Everything was connected. In that moment, Sarah realized that Emma's abduction wasn't just the act of a sick individual, but part of a massive criminal network. a secret organization exploiting the vulnerability of innocent children. She couldn't let this continue. She couldn't let Emma become just another number in the long list of children stolen from this world. Sarah quickly pulled out her phone and reported the situation over the radio. But before she could do anything else, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around, her heart racing, her eyes wide with alarm, ready to face anyone who might be sneaking up on her. But when she recognized the figure, it was Lieutenant Grant, her superior, the person she had once trusted. Sarah. Grant said, his voice soft but full of hidden meaning. Looks like you found something you shouldn't know. He stepped forward, his eyes cold, his expression devoid of emotion. Sarah sensed something was wrong. Grant, are you part of this? She couldn't believe what she was hearing, but Grant just sneered, his eyes gleaming with defiance. This isn't your business, Grant replied, his hands slowly reaching out as if ready to use force to stop her. Sarah didn't hesitate. Her voice was firm and resolute. I'm not letting this go on. I'll stop you, even if it costs me everything. Sarah felt as though everything around her was crumbling. She couldn't believe what she was facing. The clues Max had discovered led her here, and everything she saw filled her with a sense of horror and disbelief that she could never have imagined. The empty room with photos of missing children, sweat-stained documents, pictures and clues she never wanted to find, all pointed to something. Sarah had never considered the people she once trusted, the colleagues she had once called friends, were involved in a criminal conspiracy, a criminal organization beyond her wildest imagination. What she found in this warehouse wasn't just chilling evidence of kidnapped children, but also documents linking high-ranking officials in the industry. In the files, one name stunned Sarah into silence: Lieutenant Marshal Grant, her direct superior, the man she had worked alongside for so many years. A cold shiver ran down Sarah's spine, and the atmosphere in the room suddenly became thick and suffocating. No, it couldn't be. Grant, the one she had trusted and considered a friend, was involved in this. The sense of betrayal struck her like a knife to the heart. She couldn't believe it. She struggled to breathe deeply, trying to calm herself. But it was impossible. She had always thought of Grant as someone trustworthy. He was a man of vision, the one who had guided her through countless cases, always convincing her that working in this field was for a greater cause to protect justice. But now everything she knew about him seemed to crumble away. No way, it can't be, Sarah muttered under her breath, her hands trembling as she looked at the files, the names that were marked, the documents that should not have been there. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from behind her. Sarah spun around, her eyes wide with panic and fear. The familiar figure of Grant was walking toward her, his posture calm and confident, as if nothing was amiss. Sarah, Grant's voice rang out with something unsettling in his tone. I've been waiting for you. His face was emotionless, his cold eyes unchanged. I see you're very focused on those documents. Sarah couldn't hold back the surge of anger rising inside her. Grant, you can't be part of this. You were the one who taught me about justice, about how to stand up for what's right. Her voice shook, not only from anger, but also from the pain in her heart. And these children, you've turned them into pawns in your game in this criminal network. Grant didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, his gaze unwavering. But in his eyes, Sarah saw a sense of satisfaction, as though he was waiting for her reaction. Sarah, you're still too naive, he said in a calm but loaded voice. You don't understand. This isn't a simple game like you think. Sometimes in order to achieve a goal, we have to do things that no one wants to do. No, Sarah shouted. What are you talking about? What is your goal? This organization, these children, what are all of them for? A life of power. She couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. She had always thought he was on her side, but now he was standing on the opposite side. Grant smirked, his gaze sharp as a knife. I don't need to explain myself to you, Sarah. You won't understand. Sometimes to protect the ones we love, we have to sacrifice other things. He stepped closer, his eyes seemingly trying to intimidate her. You think you can stop me? You think you can do anything to change what's already happened. Sarah could feel the danger closing in. She could sense the air growing heavier as if a storm was about to break. She had kept hoping that things would be different, that Grant was just a victim of the system. But now she realized he was part of the problem, a part of the evil she had been fighting against. Don't think I'll let you get away with this. Sarah spat, her voice full of determination. I won't let you continue. I'll bring you to light no matter who you are. Grant shook his head slightly, his eyes gleaming with defiance. I've done what's necessary to survive, Sarah. You don't understand. If you want to stand in my way, we're not going to have a good ending. As Grant's words faded, a flash of movement came from his direction, and he swung his hand out. A gunshot rang out, but before he could do anything else, Max lunged forward fast as lightning blocking Grant's path. Max didn't hesitate. He growled loudly, and in one powerful leap, he knocked Grant to the ground, sending him crashing in pain. Sarah didn't waste a second. She quickly moved forward, pressing her gun to Grant's back, her voice unwavering. You've lost. You'll pay for what you've done. She no longer felt any guilt. This betrayal was too much, and it had crossed the line. In that moment, Sarah realized that the battle wasn't just against the obvious villains outside, but also against those she had once trusted, those who wore a mask of morality to hide their dark crimes. She had stood firm against this betrayal, and she would continue to fight not just for Emma, but for all the children harmed in the shadows. Sarah stood frozen, her eyes still locked on Emma's photo. This photo was not just an ordinary image. It was a symbol of the hidden secrets, the pain Emma was enduring. She couldn't tear her gaze away from the innocent smile on the little girl's face, but Sarah knew all too well that behind that smile was a story full of sorrow. It wasn't just about a kidnapped child, but a deeper betrayal, a dark secret Emma didn't even know about herself. The photo was just the beginning of what Sarah would have to face. In the small room of the warehouse, photos of missing children served as silent evidence, continuously accusing Emma's photo was still intact, untouched, while all the other photos had a red cross through them, as if they had been erased from the world. Sarah couldn't comprehend it all. Everything seemed like a chaotic mess. She bent down, her hands trembling as she flipped through each file, hoping to find some clue. But what she found made her choke up. It was an unbelievable story. Emma was not Grace Thompson's legal daughter, the mother she had always trusted and loved. Emma, in fact, was not Grace's child at all, but the biological daughter of Eric Thompson, the father she could only remember through vague memories. Eric Thompson had sacrificed his life in a fire 3 years ago. But Emma didn't know that her mother wasn't her biological mother. Sarah had always thought Grace was a wonderful mother, but now she realized Grace had never legally adopted Emma. Instead, Grace was just a foster mother. This revelation stunned Sarah, as she had always believed that Grace's love for Emma was unconditional, a sincere sacrifice. But now everything had changed. One note in the file made Sarah stop, a blow to her chest. It was a short line. Emma Jennings, not the biological child of Grace, never legally adopted. Those words struck her like a knife, leaving her in shock. She couldn't understand why Grace hadn't legally adopted Emma. Why had such a truth been hidden? She had seen Emma and Grace together. The motherly bond between them was no different from that of any other happy family. But now everything was a lie. Sarah felt everything around her crumbling. The relationship between Emma and Grace, everything she had trusted about the little girl's family, was now a house built on sand. There had never been a clear answer about Emma's belonging, as the family she thought was hers wasn't really hers. The pain in Sarah's heart grew sharper. She thought of everything Emma had gone through, all that she must have suffered without ever knowing who she truly was. Without realizing it, she didn't belong to the family she loved most. Sarah's mind began to spin. She realized that Emma's story wasn't just about rescuing a kidnapped child, but about helping her understand herself, helping her find the missing pieces of her life. Sarah couldn't let Emma continue to suffer this ambiguity. She had to help the girl understand that although Grace wasn't her biological mother, the love Grace had for Emma was irreplaceable, sincere, and unconditional. But explaining this to a child who had never known she lacked something would not be easy. Sarah couldn't help but worry about how Emma would cope with this truth. As Sarah slowly processed these complex thoughts, a soft noise came from the door, followed by a figure stepping inside. Sarah turned around, her eyes sharp. It was Grace. She entered with a worried expression, but when her gaze met Sarah's, she paused for a moment, as if sensing that something was wrong. "Sarah, what have you found?" Grace asked, her voice trembling, clearly anxious. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She silently observed her for a moment, then turned her gaze to the files on the desk. "I've found the truth about Emma. You're not her biological mother, are you?" Sarah asked, her voice cold and filled with pain. These words weren't a question, but an affirmation. Grace froze her eyes, seeming to plunge into a deep abyss of conflicting emotions. She slowly sat down, covering her face as if not wanting to face the truth she had hidden for so long. After a long moment, she looked up, her eyes full of tears. "Sarah, I can't explain everything to you. I love Emma. I've loved her as my own since I met her, but I couldn't change the past." Her voice cracked, and Sarah could clearly feel the pain in those words. She couldn't deny that Grace's love for Emma was sincere, but she also couldn't ignore that Emma had been placed in a complicated and difficult situation, one where she had to rediscover herself. "She needs to know the truth, Grace," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Emma needs to understand that although you're not her biological mother, you've always been the mother in her heart, and I'll help her find peace within herself." Grace just nodded, silent, tears falling. Sarah knew that this was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey, but she also understood that no matter how hard it got, she would never give up. Emma would know the truth, and Sarah would be by her side until she could see herself clearly and understand that true love never needed a piece of paper to prove it. Sarah could never forget the moment she walked into the warehouse, where the dark secrets continued to unfold before her eyes. Every file, every picture of missing children all weighed heavily on her, filling her with fear. What she found here wasn't just evidence of a criminal network, but a huge shock to her trust in those around her. More than just saving innocent children. Sarah realized this battle wasn't only about the law and justice, but about betrayal, about the people she once trusted. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from the door, pulling Sarah out of her thoughts. She turned, her hand tightly gripping her gun, her eyes on alert. The door opened and a figure stepped in, walking with confidence, yet with eyes that held a challenge. The name Sarah never wanted to see again in her life, Lieutenant Marshal Grant, showed no surprise at seeing Sarah here. He simply stood there, his cold gaze fixed on her, arms crossed in front of his chest. "Sarah, I knew you'd come," he said, his voice calm but sharp, as though he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "You know I truly admire your persistence, but you don't understand everything you're doing is just chasing shadow." Sarah stood still, a feeling of both fear and anger rising within her. All the memories of working alongside Grant, the trust she had placed in him, were torn apart in this instant. "Are you a part of this?" Sarah couldn't hide the anger in her voice. "You've betrayed me. You're the criminal I've been chasing." Grant only smiled, unaffected by Sarah's words. "You don't understand, Sarah. You're just a pawn in this game. Everything you're doing is just part of a bigger plan, a plan you can't see. From the very beginning, you've been misled." He took a step closer, walking slowly as though he had already won. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the conversations, about all the times she had worked alongside Grant, about how he had always been at the top, directing everything. Everything now seemed to fall into place. He had been playing this game from the start, and she, along with everyone else, were just pawns in his game. Her relationship with him wasn't teamwork, as she had once thought it was manipulation, deception. "What's the price of standing with you?" Sarah clenched her teeth, unable to suppress the rising anger. These children, Emma, they're all pieces in your game, aren't they? You don't care about justice, about the victims. You just want power. Grant stopped, his eyes sharp like a razor as he looked directly at Sarah. You don't understand. I've done what I had to do to protect the people I love. And you, Sarah, you still live in this illusion about justice and law, but this world isn't what you think. It's all a game, and I'll be the one to win. Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't let Grant continue to deceive everyone, couldn't let him keep manipulating innocent children like Emma. She had come this far, fought for so long, for the noble cause to protect children, to protect justice. But now this betrayal had pushed her to the brink of despair. She couldn't and wouldn't let him escape. You're wrong, Grant, Sarah said, her voice cold but full of resolve. You can't deceive everyone anymore. I'll bring you to the light, even if it costs me everything. Grant just chuckled bitterly. You think you can stop me? He pulled a gun from his belt and aimed it straight at Sarah. In that moment, everything seemed to slow down. The dim light of the room illuminated the cold gun in Grant's hand, and Sarah could feel the danger closing in. She knew that if she didn't act now, this fight would end in a way she couldn't even imagine. But before Grant could make his move, a loud growl echoed from behind Max, Sarah's loyal canine partner, lunged at lightning speed. In an instant, Max leapt toward Grant, using his superior strength to knock the gun out of his hand. Grant was pushed back, falling to the ground in pain. Max stood firm, growling, ready to attack again if necessary. Sarah didn't waste any time. She quickly moved forward, pressing her gun to Grant's back, her voice unwavering. This time no one is coming to save you. You've lost. Grant raised his head, his eyes full of challenge but also a hint of fear. You can't win, Sarah. What you're doing is just a small flame in a sea of fire. I will never be stopped. You can't run forever, Sarah replied. This time I will end it, not just for Emma, but for all the children whose lives you've stolen. She said this with finality, gripping her gun tighter. All the emotions within her were focused on one goal. Justice had to prevail. And then the room fell silent, a moment of utter tension. Sarah stood firm, more resolute than ever, without hesitation or fear. She knew this was the moment to end it all. Sarah stood in the middle of the empty room, the dim light from the overhead lamps unable to dispel the heavy, oppressive feelings surrounding her. The files, the photos of missing children all lay scattered on the table like evidence of a truth she could no longer deny. But amidst that darkness, there was a faint glimmer of light in her mind, a light of hope, of everything she had overcome to be standing here in this moment. The sense of betrayal still lingered in Sarah's heart. She couldn't understand it. Someone she had trusted for so long, Lieutenant Marshal Grant, a person she had called a teammate, could be the one behind all of this. A whole criminal network. Innocent children, all just pawns in his game of power. She had once believed that her career, everything she did was for justice, to protect children like Emma. But now she realized that justice wasn't always upheld by the people she had trusted. Grant, he had manipulated her, deceived her, and now Sarah was facing the things that had been hidden for so many years. She thought of all the times he had spoken about justice, about integrity, but now all those words were just hollow words he used to cover up his crimes. She couldn't understand how a person could betray everything that was good just for power and ambition. She had seen so many people suffer because of corruption, but facing this, she felt like she had been punched in the face. But just as the feeling of hopelessness began to overwhelm Sarah, another thought struck her. She looked at Max, her canine partner, her loyal friend who had been by her side for so many years. Max wasn't just a working dog. He was a companion, a teammate, someone she could trust in any situation. Sarah realized that no matter how bad things got, she wasn't alone. Max had helped her through countless dangerous chases, and now once again, the dog would never abandon her. She couldn't let him win. She couldn't let criminals continue to control this life. As Sarah turned back to the files, a thought emerged. Her eyes were filled with tears, but they weren't tears of self-pity. These were tears for the children she couldn't protect. In time for Emma, for all the children who had lost their families, whose innocent lives were stolen because of greed. She understood that no matter how this battle ended, she would never stop. She wouldn't let these children become victims of indifference. Justice would never be silent. This phrase had always echoed in Sarah's mind since she first became a police officer, and now it rang louder than ever. She couldn't allow this crime to continue. She wouldn't let all her hard work be in vain. She would protect justice even if she had to face the ultimate betrayal. Suddenly, Sarah heard a noise from behind her. She turned around, her hand gripping her gun, ready to face any threat. But when she saw who it was Grace, Emma's mother. A strange feeling rose within Sarah's chest. Grace stood there, her face filled with worry, but when her eyes met Sarah's, she paused for a moment, then walked toward her. "Sarah," she spoke, her voice choked. "You found the truth, haven't you?" Sarah looked at her, a wave of pain rising in her heart. She had once thought Grace was the best mother Emma could have, but now she understood that everything was much more complicated. "Yes, I've found the truth," Sarah replied, her voice cold but unable to hide the exhaustion. "Grace, you can't keep living in this lie. Emma needs to know everything. You need to tell her the truth." Grace stood still, her eyes filled with tears as she looked at Sarah. She knew this would be difficult, but she also understood that Emma needed to know the truth about herself. "Sarah," Grace said, her voice breaking, "I love Emma as my own daughter, but I can't change the past. I just wanted to protect her, to help her live a happy life." Sarah looked at her, the conflicting emotions within her. She understood that Grace had done everything for Emma, but she couldn't keep hiding this truth forever. Emma needs to know that even though you're not her biological mother, the love you've given her is unconditional. I can't let her live in this ambiguity anymore. I can't let her suffer what she doesn't deserve. Sarah said, her voice resolute, her gaze fixed on Grace. Grace said nothing more, only nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. Sarah knew this was a hard decision, but it had to be made right now. The love between Grace and Emma was real, but Emma needed to understand that that love didn't need a certificate to prove it. The truth, no matter how difficult, had to be told, and Sarah wouldn't stop until Emma knew everything. As Sarah walked out of the warehouse, she felt a shift inside her. She no longer felt fear. She would do whatever it took to protect Emma, to help her find peace within herself. She couldn't change the past, but she could change Emma's future, help her overcome all the challenges, and find the truth about herself. As Sarah walked out of the warehouse, the tension in her heart still wouldn't dissipate. Everything felt ambiguous and tangled like a mess she couldn't fully unravel. She had just faced the betrayal of a teammate she had once trusted. Lieutenant Marshal Grant, someone she had called a friend, someone she had fought alongside through countless cases. Now he was the one behind all these dark secrets. Innocent children, including Emma, were nothing more than pawns in his power game. Grant's betrayal shattered all the trust she had built, and the pain of loss twisted deep within her heart. But amidst all the confusion and anger, Sarah also felt a sense of liberation, as though she had finally found a glimmer of light in the dark. The truth about what had happened to Emma, about the family secrets she didn't even know, were no longer questions without answers. She had uncovered the reason why Emma had to face the suffering that no child should ever endure. She had found the final light in a long journey filled with the temptations of darkness. As Sarah walked through the freezing cold of the night, thoughts of Emma, Grace, and everything that had happened continuously spiraled in her mind. She couldn't stop. She couldn't think that everything was over. She had to help Emma face the truth, to help her understand that no matter how complicated and painful her past was, love and protection were always present. She couldn't let Emma continue living in the shadows of lies. When Sarah turned to find Grace, she felt a determination in her heart, a resolve that couldn't be extinguished. Everything had changed now. There was no more hesitation, no more worry about whether to tell Emma the truth. Now there was only one thing that mattered: protecting Emma, helping her get through everything, freeing her from the ambiguity about herself. Grace was waiting for Sarah at the door. Sarah could see the worry in her eyes, but when their gazes met, Sarah also saw resolve and sacrifice. Grace knew that the truth, no matter how painful, needed to be spoken. She knew Emma needed to face the past, not just to understand herself, but to live a life free of the burdens of untruths. Sarah, Grace spoke, her voice tired but determined. Do you really think you can change everything? Do you think a child like Emma can accept the truth about herself without being hurt? Sarah stood still, her hands clenched but her gaze unwavering. Emma needs to know the truth, Grace. She needs to understand that even though you're not her biological mother, you've always been her mother in your heart. She can't live in this ambiguity anymore. She needs to understand that love doesn't need certificates. It's about actions, protection, sacrifice, and unconditional care. Grace looked at Sarah, her eyes full of tears but also deep understanding. She nodded gently and said, I've done everything for Emma. I love her, but I can't keep hiding this from her. She needs to be free to live as herself. They both stood in silence for a moment, neither of them saying anything more, but the empathy and understanding between them were undeniable. Sarah knew that this was the moment to open a new chapter in Emma's life. She wouldn't let the past affect her future. No matter how difficult it was, no matter how painful, the truth had to be spoken. When Sarah entered Emma's room, the little girl was sitting on the bed, her eyes focused on the door. She didn't know that today her life would change forever. Sarah could feel the worry and fear in Emma's eyes, but she also saw a sense of anticipation, a desire to know the truth, to be freed from the unanswered questions. Sarah said, her voice soft but firm. There's something I need to tell you. It's going to be difficult, but you need to know. Emma looked at Sarah, her eyes full of confusion. I don't understand. What's going on? Sarah took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. You're not Grace's biological daughter. You're the daughter of Eric Thompson, who died in a fire 3 years ago. The room fell silent, suffocatingly. So Emma sat still, not saying a word, her eyes wide as though she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Sarah watched her, not daring to look away. She knew this truth would shock Emma, but she also knew that if she didn't face it, the girl would never be able to live fully. After a moment, Emma spoke, her voice trembling. So, Mom isn't my real mom? Sarah sat down next to the bed, gently taking the girl's hand. That's right, Emma. But Grace's love for you is real. She's cared for you, loved you like her own daughter. Love doesn't need to be validated by a piece of paper. Love is what we do for each other, and Grace has done everything for you. Emma sat in silence for a long while, then finally she hugged Sarah, burying her head in her shoulder. Tears began to fall. And in that moment, Sarah felt the release in Emma's heart. The girl no longer had to live in ambiguity, and now she could start anew, understanding more about herself and the love she had received from those around her. I understand now, Sarah, Emma whispered, her voice now stronger. I understand. Thank you. Sarah hugged her tightly, feeling the sincerity in every tear of Emma's. A new chapter in her life had begun, and Sarah knew that no matter how difficult things got, she would always be there for Emma, always protecting her. The truth had been spoken, and now all three of them, Sarah, Grace, and Emma, could move forward with a future full of hope, no longer shrouded in the darkness of lies. And so the story of Sarah, Emma, and Max opened a new chapter, not just for each of them, but for all of us. This story is not just about protecting children from crime, but about truth, love, and relationships that aren't always confirmed by papers or bloodlines. True love is built through actions, care, and sacrifice, just like the mother-daughter bond between Grace and Emma, or the unbreakable friendship between Sarah and Max. Even though life is full of challenges and betrayal, the truth will always bring liberation and hope. And those like Sarah and Max, always ready to fight for what's right, will continue to be the tireless protectors, not only for the children they love, but for the world. This story is a reminder that no matter how much suffering we endure, love and truth can light up even the darkest paths. Thank you for joining us through this emotional journey. Remember, no matter how difficult things get, the love and resilience of our four-legged friends like Max will always be an endless hope, the light that guides us. Don't forget to subscribe to Animal Tales Daily for more inspiring and meaningful stories about our most loyal companions.